What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended. We are ramping up to redraft season. Last week, we introduced you guys to best ball. This week, we're going to the other side of the ball, IDP, individual defensive players. And if you're a fan of No Punt Intended, you're going to be very familiar with who my expert is. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host. That's right, Joe Zollo on the show, and Ryan is still in the host seat. Ryan Weisse, along with Joe Zollo. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
It's the 1 day a year. It's the 1 day a year.
1 out of 52, where you're actually here, and I'm still going to do a shitty job hosting the show.
Yeah, so. That's okay though.
and that day happens on the time of year where we are allowed by Josh, the supreme leader, to talk about the other side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, IDP, individual defensive player. And if you guys have followed the show for any period of time, you know that nobody on this show knows the defensive side of the ball better than Joe. And that is the reason I have this trophy, is because Joe helped me win this trophy with a player. Oh, no, never mind. I was going to say with the player we're going to talk about tonight, but I got the two.
He didn't make the cut.
Yeah, I got because one of the guy who replaced him as your favorite safety did make the cut, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Before we do that, let's go ahead and pay a little bit of bills. I do want to remind folks that we talked about best ball last week. I had multiple people reach out to me and tell me it was one of the best episodes of No Punt Intended they've ever put together. Shout out to Justin Herzig, who knows his shit when it comes to best ball, the winner of Best Ball Mania 1 over on Underdog. And if you guys are looking to start playing on Underdog, we can help you do a little bit of a money match over there. You can get a free bonus pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash if you use promo code WOFF. That stands for Women of Fantasy Football. That is our sister site where we do promotion of all things ladies in sports, and we are partnered with Laura Oakman's Galvanize to help send women to her boot camp, to help send women to the Super Bowl as press credentials, to send them to the draft like we did just a few weeks ago. It's a very, very cool thing that we try to do here at Club Fantasy, and you can help us out. Plus, help yourself out and get a little bit of money over at Underdog if you have not done so yet. Joe, before we get into the IDP, I think we need to talk about a little bit of news and notes because some interesting stuff happened since we pre-recorded last week and ramped up. So what I'm going to do is read the news, and then I'll just let you react to what you think is the most interesting reaction. So Derek Carr calls it quits. There was talks he was going to miss the 2025 season anyway, and said he decides he's done. It's a shoulder injury taking Derek Carr out. Derrick Henry goes the other way and gets a 2-year extension for $30 million from the Baltimore Ravens. Trey Hendrickson, a guy we're going to talk about on the show, says he will not play under his current contract. And apparently there's a lot of drama going on now with text message threats that I didn't have enough time to dig into before we got on the show.
Sure.
Ravens safety Ardarius Washington tears his Achilles. He's going to miss the 2025 season. Speaking of defensive players missing the 2025 season, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from the Browns, an up-and-coming linebacker, has a neck injury. They put him on the PUP. He is also going to miss the 2025 season. And Dallas Goedert, surprisingly, when it sounded like he was going to be cut or traded, reworks his contract and is going to play the 2025 season in Philadelphia. So, Joe, we got a little bit of IDP news here, a little bit of offensive news. Let's start with the Derek Carr thing just because I think it does matter. Derek Carr was pretty damn bad last year. Does this influence how you're looking at Chris Olave or anybody on the New Orleans Saints anyway?
No.
Plain and simple, right?
No. What I wasn't expecting him to play. No. I'm avoiding the Saints offense. There you go.
Okay.
That's all I have.
And I think that's fair. I'm supremely concerned about Alvin Kamara on an offense that is going to have like a younger quarterback, because a lot of people are going to say, well, they're just going to dump off and this, that, and the other. But the concern is that Kamara is kind of the only thing defenses need to focus on at this point with that offense.
Correct.
Yeah. Anything from the IDP side of the ball? I guess we don't need to focus on Hendrickson because he's going to come up at an ugly part of the show later on. Big blow for the Browns losing Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. There was also the news that Mason Graham, their first round pick, was like throwing up in training camp and may not be as NFL ready as people hope they would be for a 4th overall pick.
I mean, wouldn't that just be perfect Cleveland Browns trade back from a quote unquote generational player, first guy we've seen play both sides of the football in forever, they trade back for a defensive tackle who's out of shape and not ready for the NFL. And that's Cleveland Browns written all over it. So, of course.
Definitely makes a ton of sense there. Joe, let's get into the IDP. We don't need to spend too much time on the news and notes. It's preseason news and notes. Let's just keep this very simple. Why should people care about IDP? Why should people play IDP? You kind of have it as your tag under your name right now. IDP. Better than team defense.
Why do I say it? What do I always say, Ryan? Do you like points?
Do you like points?
Do you like not losing points from your defense? Remember that week, you started a defense that you felt really good about and they got you -6 points and you lost by 5 points.
Because some jackass told you to stream them.
And you could have been better off just not starting a defense. Well, IDPs, you literally can't lose points unless somehow your player fumbles the football and loses it. Yeah. But at that point, he'll already get a fumble recovery,
so it's just
which counts for points. So you literally can't lose points. You're either getting 0, or in my case, my heart of hearts, Bobby Wagner in the semifinals one year dropped 51 for me. Yeah. You could be getting 51 points from Bobby Wagner. So there's, again, if you were to put Zaire Franklin last year, the number 1 IDP player, he would have ranked inside the top 10 of all fantasy football scorers. Why would you not want that? Why would you not want that? And I understand for the casual fan, they don't pay attention to the defensive side of the football. That doesn't happen. So start off with 1 IDP. There's 10 to 16 of you in the league. One defensive player.
One.
One. And if you don't, there's a list. At least one. I can promise you that. So from that standpoint, that just helps you get more into it. And it makes you focus on both sides of the football a little more, which is fun. So
Vic, I see your question. We're going to have the breakdown of positions a little bit later on in the show. We are going to cover linebackers, and I'll get that question up and give Joe a crack at ranking those guys for you. Joe, a couple of things I always like to throw in with the IDP, and you kind of took the first question from me, is how should people get started? And you're absolutely right. On sites like Sleeper now, you can just do an IDP flex. Just one guy out there, and you can do it on Yahoo as well. I don't know that you can do it on ESPN. I'm sure you can. I have never played IDP on ESPN.
I've not either. Cannot speak to it.
I assume that you're able to do the same sort of thing, but start with an IDP flex. You guys all have a favorite team. One defensive player. The one point that Joe didn't get a chance to make is the other thing other than just fantasy points is you start to pay more attention to both sides of the ball. You actually become almost a better football fan. And I hate using the term better, but now all of a sudden when your favorite quarterback's not on the field, but your favorite linebacker is, you care about what's going on the defensive side of the ball too. And like I said, you learn a lot more about football and the game becomes infinitely more interesting. I've always advocated, Joe, is after you go to IDP Flex, the next thing I want to see you do is 1 D-line, 1 linebacker, 1 DB. And I actually have 2 or 3 leagues that do that now. And it is so fun just to have that in there. And I am not someone who ever advocates for getting rid of team defense. I cut my teeth in this business on team defense. So I cannot advocate for that. That was the first article I ever written for an entire season, was a team defense article. But I will say Joe is absolutely right. When it comes to fun, IDP is so much more fun than team defense for the points he brought up. Not taking negative points. Enjoying things more, not having to worry about, some idiot telling you to stream someone and then them dropping 38 points and not getting a single sack. And it's just never very fun.
You could ask me to ask you who to stream at defensive back and help Ryan get a belt.
Exactly. I mean, literally I win the championship because of Joe telling me, pay attention to Cam Curl. This is the guy you want. I picked him up. I started him championship week. We have the 2020 Fantasy and Frames IDP Championship belt behind me because of Joe Zollo giving me the best streamer possible. Joe, we mentioned, kind of maybe breaking things down by position. And I know this part tends to get redundant year after year, but I'm hoping there's some new fans out there. So what I was hoping you would do here for us is break down what you're looking for from each position, because a lot of times people go in and just kind of latch onto their favorite player, but sometimes your favorite player isn't quite doing the things that you want them to do. And like, you'll have guys who are very, very good, but they notoriously get double teamed and maybe they don't get the numbers that you want from a fantasy standpoint. So let's just start with the defensive line. What are you kind of looking for when it comes to defensive line for fantasy football?
Tackles first, sacks second, unless you're in a sack heavy league. Some leagues you get 6 points per sack and 1 point for a tackle. Lean towards sacks at that point. But you're also probably looking for more ends than you are defensive tackles. I do have a defensive tackle inside my top 10.
I was actually gonna say, when we get to the defensive lineman, you do only have one who is officially a defensive tackle, but you do have some big guys in there because the NFL is kind of morphed where some ends would have been tackles 10 years ago. And
well, yeah, I mean, I'll throw one like Leonard Williams plays inside and out. Jeffrey Simmons plays inside and out.
Yep.
So like those are guys where technically they're listed as defensive tackles on the depth chart, but simply like Max Crosby can play anywhere on the defensive line. So versatility helps you just from if they're playing all these different gaps, then it helps. But you're really looking for more edge rusher guys because they tend to be a little more versatile in today's NFL defenses. Linebackers, middle linebackers that tackle. That's it. It's Roquan Smith, Zaire Franklin. Look at the top linebackers of the last 10 years. They're all middle linebackers that rake in tackles.
Yeah.
That's it. Sacks are secondary. Do not take, if TJ Watt is a linebacker only in your league and you're a tackle heavy league, do not take TJ Watt. He's useless. Yeah. He will score 120 less points than the top guy. He's useless. DBs, no corners. We don't like them here. Very rarely will you be taking a corner. I think I have one technical corner in my top 10, but he's like a Logan Ryan that sticks his neck in there. And for those who don't know who Logan Ryan is, this is why you should play IDP. But tackles, you're mostly looking at safeties, in the box safeties. You could go free safeties, but they tend to be back a little further. You're not looking for turnovers. Darrelle Revis was a horrible IDP player because he'd get 20 tackles in a season and 10 interceptions, which is great, but he'd finish like DB 70, which does you no good in fantasy football. So sometimes good at football equals bad at IDP, whereas kind of the opposite side of on offense, if you're good at football, you're normally good at fantasy football. But especially at the defensive back position, if you're at football at the corner position, you actually might be more beneficial than a guy who's actually good at the cornerback position. So,
yeah, I think that makes sense. And that's something we've always talked about is you want the bad corners in fantasy football. Find those guys who are getting beat all the time because
the bad coverage linebackers.
Rack up those numbers, those tackle numbers. Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's something I say, we talk about this every year. Tackles tend to be the key. And Joe, I've always kind of looked at it as tackles are kind of like your yards or your PPR. And then the sacks and the interceptions, those are your touchdowns because that's kind of the frequency that they happen. Yep. And you don't chase touchdowns in fantasy football because those are the hardest predictor. You hope for the best, but you find those guys with the solid tackle numbers, they're going to give you the solid start every week.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've always taught people in my leagues when they come in is like, look, don't overthink this. Look for the high tackle numbers. It's going to work out far better for you. Joe, we just had the draft a few weeks ago, and you kind of already alluded to this guy with the Browns. I feel like we need to spend some time on Travis Hunter. If you listen to the IDP world right now, Travis Hunter is either the most valuable IDP ever, or he is wildly overhyped. And I don't mean that other people are saying he's overhyped. I'm just saying the entire IDP world has bought into Travis Hunter, literally crowning him the 101 of any IDP draft. With this dual position eligibility, the comparison has to be made. Is he Shohei Ohtani, Joe? Like, is this what we are expecting in the IDP world for one Travis Hunter?
Yeah. Well, he plays both sides of the ball. Again, he is going to play corner, so that is a downside at the defensive back position.
I just saw a report today. They have started him at wide receiver, and starting next week, he's going to start working on rookie reps at corner.
Okay, great. If he plays in the slot, I'd like him a lot more because slots tend to stick their neck in and tackle. And Hunter is a willing tackler. Like he's not a guy that's not, but when you're on the edges, it's a lot harder to, like Malcolm Butler was a really good tackler, but he would get 50 tackles a season. Whereas a slot corner like Kenny Moore or a slot guy like Logan Ryan, who was in that same secondary, would get 80, 90 tackles because they're just closer to the ball, especially on outside zone runs and pitches and things like that. They're just closer to the action. So, yes, it's great, but let's just say Travis Hunter averages you in 2 points per tackle leagues. He gets you 3 tackles a game and a pass deflection. That's realistic. So let's say that's 8 points right there on the defense, 9 points on the defense. Okay, then he goes 3 for 30 on offense.
Yeah.
That's 16, 15 points every week.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Like there's a lot of DBs where if you're looking at the defensive backs, the averages for these guys, average fantasy points per game at the defensive back position is 14.1. That was Budda Baker.
Yeah.
And the next closest guy was Nick Cross at 12.9.
Yeah.
Like, all he has to do is get 3 tackles and 3 catches, and he's a top 5 defensive back.
I don't have the generic fantasy stats available, but I can tell you my home league is a full PPR league. And on defense, we're turnover and touchdown heavy. Tackles just kind of are the base, like we were talking about. I did the quick math on him because we just had our draft lottery this week. And when you look at what Travis Hunter did, I have him as a 100 target guy, which isn't great for fantasy right now. It puts him as like the wide receiver 40. But in my league, which is a PPR league, it puts him at like, if I remember my math correctly, it puts him at like 140 fantasy points, something like that. So I don't remember the math exactly. It may be half PPR, but regardless, it put him at like 140. If he simply gets 100 on defense, where in my league, most defensive backs are getting like 140, that puts him at 240. And that puts him 20 points higher than the number 1 IDP scorer last year. And essentially, especially in these flex leagues we've been telling people to start, Joe, it gives you the ability to start a 4th wide receiver, which nobody else can do if your league is capped at 3 wide receivers.
Correct. It's a no-brainer. Like, I don't know how early you should take him. I mean, it's wait and see camp reports and see how they're using him. But man, he should go pretty high. He should go pretty high.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question, Joe, and I know the answer is no, but I just want to say it out loud so you can tell me I'm an idiot. Baseball is obviously scored and done very differently than football. Mm-hmm. So Shohei was kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Capped in baseball because you had to choose what you were going to start him as, and you don't get pitching stats and hitting stats because in baseball, everything is separated. There's no way they would even come up with a way of doing something crazy like that with Travis Hunter, correct?
No, I mean, you
I didn't
can't
think so. It's just that if your league has IDP, you're going to get all those points. My concern is for those leagues that are only team defense. They're not going to get any of those points.
No,
because your league doesn't score IDP. So
yeah, Travis Hunter's worthless in every league that's not IDP.
Yeah, like I said, he statted out to like my wide receiver 40. Like, that's boring. Now, again, if it becomes a Shohei thing, like we're only going to pitch him when it matters and we're only going to put him at corner when it matters and he plays 90% offense, everything could change at that point. So,
well, you still play him in IDP, which is still...
Well, you 100% play him in IDP without a doubt.
Chico.
But on offensive leagues, he might actually become a little bit more valuable. I'm sure people are going to have a ton of questions about Shohei, about Travis Hunter as we get closer to the season. But Joe, there were some other really interesting rookies in this draft, and we commented on our draft show. A lot of the first round wasn't friendly to fantasy offensive IDP, but there were some interesting defensive IDP players right off the rip. Your first rookie you want to talk about, Abdul Carter, was also an early first round pick in this draft.
That's the layup here. Interesting rookie. It's Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
Plays on the line with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. The Giants defensive line's pretty good, guys. It's not bad. So I like Carter. Jalen Walker in Atlanta. Caden Ellis was the linebacker 3 last year.
Yeah.
None of you knew who Caden Ellis was. I barely knew who Caden Ellis was, but I drafted him. Again, I don't like to, I like to pump myself up a little bit, but when we get to the DBs, I'm going to pump the shit out of Budda Baker because I nailed that fucker last year. I destroyed that pick last year.
Yeah.
But Jalen Walker, I like in Atlanta. There's a lot of opportunity for him. These 2 guys I added because of injury news. I didn't know who the Ravens safety was, but that's less competition for Malachi Starks.
100%.
He's going to play opposite Kyle Hamilton. That's perfect. That's what we love. And then with the news of JOK out in Cleveland, that leaves second-round pick Carson Schlesinger out of UCLA wide open to take the job and be the main guy on that defense because Cleveland don't have anybody else. So I like Schlesinger a lot. I'm not drafting him, but if you're in deep IDP leagues, you need a guy. Schlesinger should be a guy you should look at. And then Donovan, however the hell you say his last name, as Uraku, I think that's wrong.
All I remember is I got destroyed for trying to pronounce that name on draft nights.
All I know is he's opposite Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
He's not going to see
really well for him.
He's not going to see double teams. He's going to see one-on-ones, and that should be very good for him. He sees New York twice a year, so that really helps out. But yeah, I mean, it's when you play opposite another guy, especially as a rookie, that's only going to help you out. He could have an 8-9 sack season this year.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about defense is we always tell people have patience on the offensive side with rookies. Defensive rookies can kind of step up out of nowhere because the fact of the matter is this: NFL teams cycle defense far more than they cycle offense. So like these rookies, even if they are stuck behind somebody, they're going to get on the field. And if they're the better player, they're going to get on the field more. But you've hit the nail on the head. Watch out for these injuries to veterans that are going to open things up, especially for these higher drafted rookies. But that's also why, Joe, we'll see some of these like 6th round guys all of a sudden because the injuries open the field up for them, get out there and just outplay some of those veterans and get on the field quite quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, keep an eye on the rookies, know where they were drafted, and keep an eye on those injuries and look out for the rookies who are coming up behind them. Joe, I think we're ready to dive into the rankings. So every year, normally we have another guest on the show with us and we compare and contrast where you're different and they're different. And to be honest, we kind of struck out with the guests, but Joe, I think we're going to probably have a little bit more fun with this because there were some shocking things. So what we did was we had you list your top 10 and then I went and found the consensus top 10. This is the consensus from Fantasy Pros. Couple of things, and it's very early in the season. It's April 21st. Joe, when I looked, Fantasy Pros currently said that their rankings was compiled of only 3 rankers. I did not look who they are, so we are shitting on 3 people right now because that is the kind of show that we do here. So what I'm going to do, Joe, is I'm going to list your top 10, and then we'll talk about some of the players who are missing from the consensus or missing from your rankings that are in the consensus. So, Joe, starting at 1, you have Max Crosby as your number 1 defensive lineman. Number 2 is Brian Burns. Number 3 is Myles Garrett. Number 4, TJ Watt. Number 5, Leonard Williams. Number 6, Jeffrey Simmons. 7 is Kalijah Cansey. 8 is Aiden Hutchinson. 9 is Will Anderson. And 10 is Dexter Lawrence. And we put Brian Burns on the thumbnail. And Joe, the very first thing you noticed when I put the consensus in, and the very first thing that jumped off the screen at me is your number 2 defensive lineman does not even appear in the current consensus top 10 defensive linemen. This doesn't sound right to me.
This is the same thing last year about Budda Baker when he wasn't ranked inside the top 10 too. And how'd he finish?
Yeah, exactly.
This shocks me. Brian Burns was inside the top 10 in total fantasy points and points per game last year. He wasn't a ghost. And this team sucked. Let's get the Giants were horrible. So he wasn't a ghost. And you now add Dexter Lawrence back, who's going to be fully healthy because he missed a lot of the season, which is why I put Dexter Lawrence at 10 because people are going to forget about him. He was 16th in fantasy points per game. You put him next to Abdul Carter. You could argue that, and this is legit Pro Bowl level Brian Burns. This isn't, oh, look, Drake May's a Pro Bowler. No, this is a legit Pro Bowler, potential All-Pro. Brian Burns is going to arguably be the 3rd person to worry about on the defensive line. That's a problem for the offense because that means Brian Burns is probably not seeing chips because you're probably going to have 1 tight end and you're going to want to chip Abdul Carter more than you're going to want to chip Brian Burns. Dexter Lawrence is going to get double teamed in the middle. So that leaves Brian Burns one-on-one with a right tackle, most likely.
Whew. And this is a guy who is coming off of a defense where he was the focal point, had 17 tackles for a loss and 9 sacks last year. So,
guys, I don't know what we're missing here. 2 might be high, But
one thing I do want to throw out there is there could be positional discrepancy, and that happens a lot when it comes to linebackers and defensive linemen. But Brian Burns is also not in their top 10 linebackers. I do want to throw that out there.
So that's right. So I will admit fault. I did put my stuff in here before the consensus. Completely forgot about Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
Blew my mind. That's fine. He should be in here. If anything, I would probably put him at 5 and bump everybody down a spot, and Lawrence would fall to 11. But it's the same scoring that I'm going off of, because you don't put TJ Watt, Micah Parsons inside the top 5 at defensive lineman, and Josh Hines Allen if you're not going based off sacks. So it's still roughly in the same spot, and I hope Brian Burns is inside the top 15 at minimum on the consensus, because that's crazy he doesn't crack the top 10, especially with guys like Danielle Hunter and Trey Hendrickson, who we'll get to, who is the love of my life, who has been inside my top 3 the last 2 seasons, and I have hit that shit out of the park
every year.
But I have a reasoning this year, and it's very clear and apparent in the media right now. But Brian Burns is that guy for me right now, because no one has to pay attention to him. No one's required to pay attention to him on the offensive line. He's the afterthought. Right now, for offenses, he's the afterthought. So that's why I like Brian Burns a lot this year.
Let's talk about a player who didn't make your top 10, and I understand the why, but I also think this is a name recognition thing on the other side of the ball. Nick Bosa seems to be a darling for a lot of people, and it's sort of like burning money at this point. So
Nick Bosa is really good on tape. Nick Bosa will get to the quarterback. Won't get you any fantasy points, though. Nick Bosa will take a lot of plays off because he's Nick Bosa.
Now, Joe, I hate to be contradictory, but I'm looking at Bosa's numbers from last year, and they're very similar to Brian Burns. But I do want to throw out there what you pointed out. 2 very different situations. Burns is not going to be a focal point, which could help him on his team.
Yes, and also, would you look at the trash that Nick Bosa played last year? Respectfully.
Yeah.
Respectfully. Those offensive lines are garbage in that division. They're horrible. Fair. So, and that obviously bodes well, and I'm not one to trash. Like, yeah, if you're going against a bad offensive line, you should probably pick up that defensive end if you need a guy, because that's going to be, you play the positional matchup there. I do not trust putting, same way with both the Bosa brothers. When Joey Bosa was getting touted, it's like, oh, you got to put Joey Bosa in there. No, you don't, because he's injury prone, comes off the field and is rotational. Nick Bosa can just walk off the field whenever the hell he wants to with no repercussion, because they gave him all this money. What does it matter?
Yeah.
I don't like Nick Bosa at all. I think Nick Bosa is a solid defensive player. He's definitely good at what he does. He's not a viable fantasy asset. He has boom weeks, and then he has heavy bust weeks.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking to avoid, especially in leagues where you're starting one IDP guy. It's what we talked about, Joe. You want the guys with the tackles that you can rely on, not the guys that
he has no versatility as well. He has 0 versatility, whereas guys like a Brian Burns can drop into coverage or play the run. TJ Watt can literally do it all. Nick Bosa is a one-trick pony, and I don't like that. Same thing with Joey Bosa. They're both one-trick ponies.
And then, Joe, the last thing I want to talk about with the defensive ends, because we're going to talk about Hendrickson in a later section, is the 4 guys that I kind of alluded to, where you don't seem to be afraid of the bigger guys the way, and I mean like bigger guys, Leonard Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, Kalijah Kancey, Dexter Lawrence. Not one of those made the consensus. What do you see in their games that maybe common rankers aren't seeing right now? And I think it's what you've already brought up, the versatility.
Let's drop them down line. So Leonard Williams is at 5. Plays all over, is a disruptor, plays the run, and can get to the quarterback from inside or out. He normally is playing the nose tackle or the A or B gap.
Yeah.
That works with me. He can go to the C, he can go to the D, can even stretch it out to the wider as well, to the 9 and 8 holes. Jeffrey Simmons. The constant disrespect that Jeffrey Simmons gets blows my mind. He currently right now is the second best defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's because Dexter Lawrence is the best defensive tackle in the NFL. And Simmons was the best last year because Lawrence didn't play the whole season.
Yeah.
Kalijah Kancey. the reason he's not in anybody's top 10 is because I'm insane. And
but to Joe's credit, when he's insane, it tends to work out well.
It tends to be right. I put Cansey as a sleeper last year, and I have to pull it up here to see exactly where he ended up landing. Because on a full season basis, he didn't play the full season.
Yeah, he missed 5 games, but he finished as the defensive lineman 36 according to fantasy data.
So 36. And then if you look at Kalijah Cansey,
8 sacks.
8 sacks
in 12 games.
I'm sorry.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a
Again,
pace.
Another guy where defenses aren't going to worry about you. They're going to worry about blocking 500-pound Vita Vea first before they worry about blocking Kalijah Cansey. And not to mention Yaya Diaby and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. They have a very good offense or front four that the Bucs do. And then you're worrying about Levante David, Antoine Winfield shooting the gap. There's all these different players.
And I think that goes to your point about the Giants, Joe, is that like when Kalijah Cansey, who was considered a D tackle coming out, when he went there, we were worried because Vita Vea is already there, but that's where this versatility and ability to play other positions and not be the guy that everyone has to worry about. People who were worried about him going there and playing next to Vita Vea were worried about the wrong things.
I'm also riding the Aaron Donald comp so high right now.
Yeah,
that's Aaron Donald was my one every single year. And again, I wasn't wrong. And then the last guy, Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is going to be a forgotten piece, but last year in points per game, he was 16th at 9.3, which literally puts him less than a point outside of the top 10 in points per game. He only played in 12 games. You don't hear a lot from this guy because he is an interior defensive lineman, and that he really does not play anywhere outside of the A and B gaps. But he is the best defensive tackle in the NFL, bar none. It really isn't a competition right now. Since Aaron Donald left, Dexter Lawrence has been the best defensive tackle in the NFL. Simmons had it last year because Dexter Lawrence was not playing a full season.
Yeah.
Full season with Dexter Lawrence. He has 2 other people that are going to take some pressure away from him at some point or the other. I think that opens up a lot more holes for him, and he's a fantastic run stuffer. Dexter Lawrence is a stretch for the top 10, but there's a real path for him that hasn't been there in years past.
No. All right, let's move on to the linebackers. Again, I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to give you Joe's top 10. We'll talk about some of the people who are noticeably absent from the consensus that Joe likes and the other way around. So Joe has Zaire Franklin at 1, Alex Singleton at 2, Jamie Sherwood at 3, Roquan Smith at 4, Robert Spillane at 5, Deion Henley at 6, Jordan Brooks at 7, TJ Edwards at 8, Bobby Wagner, the man, the myth, the legend at this point at 9. And Bobby, I forget where we settled on this. Is it Okereke? Is that where we settled?
It used to be Okereke. Now I believe it's Okereke.
Okay, is that where we settled?
Sure.
Joe, I'm going to start with a guy who we don't need to highlight much. Consensus has Roquan at 1. You have him at 4. Any big difference there? Is it just everybody at the top can kind of be mixed in a little bit?
So. Baltimore has a lot more tacklers around Roquan Smith than the Colts do around Zaire Franklin.
So you're worried about seeing things stolen, whereas Zaire Franklin has to be in on every play for Indianapolis.
When Kyle Hamilton lines up directly next to you, you have to be worried. And when I can't even tell you who the Colts safeties are that go up in the box, like that's like Zaire Franklin. He just has free reign to do whatever he wants.
Joe, Jamie Sherwood was a name that kind of popped up last year after not a lot of people knew who he was. Didn't really expect him to be one of the top linebackers. He doesn't make the consensus top 10, but you think he can repeat what he did last year?
I didn't know the guy. I looked up his stats. He was irrelevant the first 3 seasons he was in the NFL.
Yeah.
Had a career year last year.
Yes, he did.
He's back, and he's the Mike linebacker on the depth chart for the Jets. Sign me up.
154 combined tackles last season.
Unbelievable, first off. And he's in a division where the Patriots are going to run the football. They will throw, but they're also going to throw short because it's a Josh McDaniels offense.
Yeah.
The Dolphins don't understand any plays more than 2 yards downfield. And the Buffalo Bills. So 6 times a year, this guy is loaded up with in the box potential. for tackles. And so to be fair, I had Quincy Williams last year in my top 10. He's the weak side guy now. Don't like that.
I say he got shifted because of the outstanding play of Sherwood.
Kaiser White went from Philly, I believe he went from Philly to the Chargers or to the Cardinals, and he went from Mike to weak side. Irrelevant when he went weak side. Not saying Quincy Williams is going to be irrelevant, but the Mike linebacker can go both sides of the field. Weak side, you're really stuck to that one side. And weak side tends to mean you're not getting the football in your direction. So I like Jamie Sherwood. I'm going to give him a shot, and just based off of his stats and everything, he's 25 years old. Like he can rock it. And in that Jets defense, there's a strong potential, strong opportunity for him.
Joe, I've never heard you say a negative thing about Fred Warner, so I was a little shocked to not see him in your top 10.
I'm shocked he's in the consensus.
Ooh, really? I mean, he was number 10 last year. The census has him up at 4 now.
I love Fred Warner. I was going to say,
you've always given him his flowers, so I was a little surprised by this.
I love Fred Warner. He's 12th according to Fantasy Pros in terms of total fantasy points. In points per game, he was 24th. So when it comes to fantasy points, he wasn't great. And what I always say, Fred Warner's the best coverage linebacker in the NFL.
Absolutely.
That doesn't bode well.
Not great
for fantasy football. So Fred Warner, you're looking at tackles, things like that. Like, he had 7 pass deflections, 2 picks, 4 forced fumbles. He had 76 tackles. You're looking at guys ahead of him. The only guy ahead of him that had less tackles was Andrew Van Ginkel, because he had 11.5 sacks.
Yeah. 20 fewer solo tackles than Jamie and Sherwood, who we just talked about. So.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I love Fred Warner, and if Fred Warner is there, take him. He's going to be ranked high on linebackers. He is. He's probably going to be top 5 wherever you play. Just don't go crazy with Fred Warner, because he is a fantastic football player and a linebacker, but that doesn't bode well. He also has injury history, which does concern me in San Francisco. That's my big concern there.
And then a couple of the other names that we're going to save Dan Henley for later on in the show. Robert Spillane, Jordan Brooks. You have these two ranked 5 and 7. They don't make the consensus. If I remember correctly, Joe, you're not a big Nick Bolton guy, correct? Because he did make 6, and he doesn't make your list. So
yeah. So the last 2 years, I've not ranked Nick Bolton inside my top 10. You want to know where Nick Bolton hasn't landed? Inside the top 20. He's inside the top 20 because he's bad. Nick Bolton is bad. You want to know what inflated his stat? Was the Super Bowl 2 years ago when he made those plays. That is what has inflated Nick Bolton's status in the NFL, and especially in fantasy football. Nick Bolton is a one-trick pony at linebacker, and he's not even that good of a one-trick. He is an inflated Brandon Spikes. If Nick Bolton played in the 80s, he'd be the linebacker 1 every single week. He would be that guy is a 1980s linebacker. He is not a 2025 linebacker.
Yeah.
Nick Bolton that high, criminal in the consensus.
Ooh.
That's insane to me.
I was going to say, that's one you're clearly not a fan of. Talk to us about Spillane and Brooks. Brooks is a guy no longer with
Seattle
in Miami now, if I remember correctly. Or at least
he was in Miami last year.
I was going to say, yep.
You want to know what he did in Miami?
Well, that's what I was going to say. We saw Brooks kind of take the mantle for Bobby Wagner, but then he has continued that in another system. So
yes, Jordan Brooks isn't a great linebacker. He just makes tackles. He's not a great linebacker, but he makes tackles. And they used him a decent amount in coverage. He had 6 pass deflections and a couple fumble recoveries, but all his fantasy points came from tackles, which is huge. Like we said, that's the big part. I don't love Jordan Brooks as a player. As a fantasy football guy, check mark, sign me up. Robert Spillane was the linebacker 3 last year.
Ooh.
In Vegas.
Yeah.
He was the linebacker 3 last year. Why is he not in the consensus top 10?
158 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, which is, he's not great in pass coverage, but 7 defensive passes, 2 interceptions. He's clearly getting better than what I gave him credit for.
He had the 2nd most combined tackles in the NFL behind Zaire Franklin.
Yeah.
but we're not going to put him inside the consensus top 10. Okay, thank you. I'll take the steal on Robert Spillane. He's now the middle linebacker for the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
Do you want to know how good middle linebackers have been in New England? Pretty fucking good.
And then let's not even talk about the culture change and the scheme changes that are happening in New England now.
Oh no. Mike Vrabel's his head coach. What was Mike Vrabel? The middle linebacker for the New England Patriots. Why do you think they got Robert Spillane as their first free agent pickup?
Well, not to mention, Vrabel spent all that time with Cleveland last year, and Cleveland's linebackers had great years. So.
Robert Spillane is going to be a steal for whoever gets him. He should be a sleeper. Dayon Henley is my official linebacker sleeper. But holy hell, I did not realize how good of a season Spillane had because, the Raiders were so bad. They were the laughingstock of the NFL. So I didn't realize how good a season he had. But I knew Robert Spillane could make plays and could tackle. He does not miss tackles. And we already talked about the division that he's going to be in with Jamie and Sherwood. You think the Jets are going to throw the football? No. No. Robert Spillane's going to have a fun time playing the New York Jets twice a season. So Spillane, there's a legit chance Robert Spillane is 100 solos this year. There's a legit chance of that happening.
Before we move on from linebackers, Joe, let's get Vic up. Vic asked this question a while ago. I asked him to be patient while we got to the linebackers.
Yeah.
Wants us to rank these guys. We got Trevin Wallace out in Carolina, Mack Wilson Sr. from Arizona, Dorian Williams from Buffalo, Tyler Dodson out in Miami, Henry, is it
To'o?
To'o?
To'o.
And then I don't
KJ Britt.
I'm like, I am blanking, and it's because of the initials. I was trying to find a first name. I kept thinking Kenny Britt, the old wide receiver.
You love Kenny Britt?
Yeah, I was like, who the hell? I forgot about KJ Britt. There you go. So, Joe, how would you rank these guys for Vic out there for us?
Here's my issue, Vic. I didn't realize a lot of these guys even were available or even played in the NFL.
Mack Wilson had a pretty good year last year.
Mack Wilson's not bad. That's the one I knew. This is like you're deep in it. You're in a deep league. You're playing 11 IDPs. You're playing at every position. Because in my opinion, none of these guys should even be touched in 99% of IDP leagues.
Trevin Wallace, I am lucky enough to cover Carolina for football guys during the offseason. Trevin Wallace is kind of like the do-all for them, but he's like, what is it? The jack of all trades, master of none. They kind of put him in there when someone gets hurt. I think he's probably earned his way into a starting role after being third on the team in tackles last year. But
they run a 3-4. They run 2 inside linebackers, and he's the left inside linebacker. But Josie Jewell's the better tackler.
Yeah,
so he's good. So Josie Jewell clogs the tackles, and that's
it's kind of that weak side thing that you were talking about. Not necessarily the same exact, but
yeah. Also, just to toot my own horn because we didn't mention Alex Singleton. Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell in Denver together. Everyone had Josie Jewell ahead of Alex Singleton.
On top of that,
who was the guy that had Alex Singleton ahead of Josie Jewell because he said Josie?
Well, I was going to say, I don't think this is an IDP show if we don't let you talk about Alex Singleton or somebody from Denver. You were the first one to put us onto that safety from Denver.
Justin Simmons.
I was going to say, I'm blanking on the name right now, but you were so in on Simmons. And
what did you do that year?
Already.
DB5.
I was going to say like DB1 led DBs in tackles. I do remember that. So
all I'm telling you is Josie Jewell's a bum. I mean, that could open the door for Trevor Wallace, but Alex Singleton was the guy. Anyways, these are deep play guys. Dorian Williams is a backup. Dodson is a starter, but Britt's his backup. To'o, I picked up a couple times last year.
So he's interesting. He crossed 100 total tackles last year. You want to see some improvement out of him this year.
To'o is a guy that you're going to pick up on a week-to-week basis. You're not doing much more with him. None of these guys I'm rushing to get, plain and simple. I think injuries or anything, like if Josie Jewell gets hurt, I think Wallace is a great pickup. But they just also got Christian Roseboom. From LA, the Rams, who is very good at the middle linebacker position.
Solid player. Yeah.
So the only guy I'm like even flirting with is To'o. Dorian Williams is behind Matt Milano. Unless Milano gets hurt, then you're okay. But Matt Milano is one of the better middle linebackers in the NFL. So
Yeah, that's what elevated Williams last year was. Milano broke his forearm or whatever and was out.
And then Williams got hurt, and then Milano came back in and played for him. So
yeah, so
yes, and Williams played well Williams is great, but he will play behind Matt Milano. Matt Milano's a dog.
There you go. So Toto is 1. Everybody else is tied for 2, and you shouldn't be rushing to get any of them. Is how we would have it, Vic. I hope that answers.
Literally none of them.
All right, Joe. That's going to move us on to the linebackers. You guys know the rhythm of the show by now. Thank you, Joe. You guys know the rhythm of the show by now. We got Brian Branch at 1, Antoine Winfield at 2, Kyle Hamilton at 3, Derwin James at 4, Jesse Bates at 5, Jaquan Brisker at 6, Nick Cross at 7, Paulson Odebo at 8, Julian Love at 9, Buda Baker at 10. Joe, this is the one where you and the consensus are almost in lockstep. A few players off a couple of positions.
Yeah.
I'm going to start the opposite way, Joe. A guy who the consensus included that you did not is your own New England Patriot, Kyle Dugger. Not feeling him this year?
They did it last year, too. They had Dugger inside the top 10. And yes, he was hurt, but DB 25 in points per game. He was the DB. Hold on, I gotta scroll. The DB 49 in points.
Oh no!
Respect. Like Kyle Dugger had a shit season. He was not good. And you asked me that last year. You're like, why don't you have your own safety there? It's like, because I know my own safety.
Exactly. Joe, this is why I do it, because whenever someone ranks a Patriot higher or lower than you, I'm like, they don't know the Patriots better than Joe.
No. Kyle Dugger. Now, granted, he'll have a better season this year, I believe. I think he'll have a better season. They'll put him in a better rotation, a better system.
At you, though. Does Spillane being the short tackler he is, that kind of hurts Dugger a little bit as well, because we're not talking about missed tackles from the linebacker position.
Yeah, because you don't have Jawan Bentley in the middle. Yikes. Yeah, I mean, that definitely hurts Kyle Dugger said, because holy God, Bentley would just fill the wrong gap and he would just miss tackles. And guess who was there? Kyle Dugger. And the thing that will help Kyle Dugger too is if Jabril Peppers isn't playing, that helps Kyle Dugger as well.
Okay.
But if Peppers is playing, that kills Kyle Dugger, because Jabril Peppers is a better tackler than Kyle Dugger.
And they treat Peppers more like a linebacker, where they're going to move him up and force Dugger to play back a little bit.
They treat Peppers like the Tampa 2 linebacker safety.
100%.
That's how they treat him. And then they put Dugger back as the deeper guy. But if Peppers isn't in, then they treat Dugger as the Tampa 2 linebacker.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't draft Kyle Dugger. He's going to be there. He's going to be ranked high. Don't draft Kyle Dugger. I implore you, please don't draft Kyle Dugger. You're going to hate yourself.
And let's just stick with the negative, and we'll wrap up with the guys you like better. Josh Metellus is a guy. 2 years ago, we were talking about how the Minnesota safeties were kind of like, you never knew who you wanted. Metellus seems to be the one that everybody seems to have jumped on board with. But I still feel like that Minnesota defense, it's a little bit of everybody doing everything. And while Metellus has been pretty good, he doesn't make your top 10.
DB 55 in points per game, DB 29 in points. Why is he in the top 10?
Yeah, 10 feels high.
I'm just he's at 8. He's above Jesse Bates, who's been a top 10 safety the last 4 seasons. He's above Julian Love, who has been a consistent top 15 safety.
And this is not a player in Metellus that we're talking about missing games. Played all 17 games last year.
Yeah, but you want to know the thing about Minnesota? All of their players are garbage on defense. Brian Flores just here's my best description of the Minnesota Vikings defense. They're a trash can. And what Brian Flores does is he puts the Febreze trash bag into the trash can to be like, no, look, it smells good. How
much better it is now.
Yeah. But then, each game goes by, things get put inside of it, and you're like, oh, they do suck. Like Byron Murphy had his best season of his career. You want to know why? Brian Flores was his freaking coach. Because in Arizona, he wasn't that good. Brian Flores was coach. Josh Metellus should not be drafted. Plain and simple. I don't understand why Josh Metellus is here.
And I think that's fair. I want to stick with one more guy that I think the consensus might have been too low on. Brian Branch. You have him at 1, which is exactly where I'd put him.
Light him up.
Consensus has him all the way down at 6. The only argument for Brian Branch not being the first off the board is a fully healthy, your second guy, a fully healthy Antoine Winfield. But I think you have to go Branch. Branch is doing things on defense. Reminds you of some old school football. He's just all over the place, never afraid to stick his neck into anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just straight. This is me trying to go back to back on swings for the number one, because nobody's going to rank Brian Branch number one. They won't. It's going to be Derwin, Antoine Winfield, maybe Kyle Hamilton. Those are going to be most people's ones are going to be those guys.
16 defended passes last year, which tied him for first with Alontae Taylor, a corner who we're going to mention in a few moments. 4 interceptions, which tied him for first among safeties. Keep in mind, when I said 16 passes defended, that's tied for first among all DBs. 4 interceptions, which ties him for first among safeties with our guy Jesse Bates. So,
and he missed a game.
Yeah. We're talking about guys who played all 17 who are insanely high ranked. And again, ranking Branch at 6 isn't sacrilege. Ranking him behind Kyle Duggar,
ranking him below
ridiculous.
Kyle Duggar is. Ranking him below Kyle Duggar is. So, I love Brian Branch. I had him on every team last year. I was fortunate enough to have him on every team, and I literally opened my app session. I'm like, oh, look, another 30-point performance from Brian Branch. This is great. He's all over the field. Love Winfield. I think I had Winfield as my number one last year. I think a lot of people did.
100%.
Obviously, the injury that hurt him. Kyle Hamilton, I think, has a little bit of a bounce back, but I really don't think anybody touches Brian Branch. I really don't. He's all over the field.
I'm with you on that. Let's wrap up the safeties with the 2 guys that you have ranked that they don't, well, the corners, but are the DBs, but it's safeties. Nick Cross and Paulson Adebo. I think Nick Cross, you kind of said a lot of what you needed to say about Nick Cross with Zaire Franklin, because it's the fact that if Zaire Franklin ain't making the tackle, Nick Cross is making
Nick Cross is. Yeah, Nick Cross is 100%. And Paulson Adebo, again, I didn't realize this. Paulson Adebo was number 1 in fantasy points per game for defensive backs.
Oh, wow.
At 14.8. He only played in 7 games.
Yeah.
But in those 7 games for the crappy New Orleans Saints, 52 combined tackles in 7 games, 10 pass deflections, 3 picks. In 7 games.
Do you understand that that's a pace of 104 tackles for a corner?
For a corner.
Yeah. So yeah, if you are forced to start a corner, Adebo needs to be on your radar.
And that's where, like, he's in New York now with the Giants.
Yep.
What helps a cornerback?
Pass rush.
A really good pass rush.
Yes.
So,
indeed.
like, Adebo's going to see probably the number 1 guy. And you know what's going to happen? Adebo's going to get beat sometimes.
He's going to get beat because, as Joe will tell you, every corner in the NFL sucks compared to the wide receivers across from them. So,
I mean, yeah, tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. You're 100% right. Wide receivers have always had the advantage, but it is way blown out of proportion.
Unless you're Patrick Surtain, I will not be. I'm not afraid of you unless you're Patrick Surtain.
Exactly.
Paulson Adebo is going to see the number 1. And Adebo will have some good games, and he'll be tight on coverage, and there'll be some missed throws where he'll get pass deflections, interceptions. But there's also going to be a lot of times where he allows the catch, but makes the tackle. That's perfect. We love that.
And what I think helps him with being the number 1 in that division with the New York Giants, I'm not saying these guys aren't great, but they're not Tyreek Hill burners. CeeDee Lamb is a guy who can make the catch and get tackled. Terry McLaurin is certainly a guy who can make the catch and get tackled. And the same thing can be said of A.J. Brown, probably the number 1 in Philadelphia. So.
Even McLaurin can burn you. A.J. can burn you.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying these guys are slow. I'm just saying they're not going to burn
to that point, like A.J. Brown's not a quick guy. He needs to get to his top speeds of Derrick Henry. Terry McLaurin's fast, but Adebo's no slouch, guys. He can move. And I'm very rare to rank a corner inside my top 10, but I could not ignore what Adebo did. So I may get bit in the ass on this one, but I do like Paulson Adebo. If they're ranking Josh Metellus at 8, I can rank Paulson Adebo at 8. All right.
There you go. No, I like you said, number 1 in points per game over 7 games. There's where there's smoke, there's usually fire, and it's something that he could be a deep sleeper this year. Speaking of which,
Paulson Adebo played 10 less games than Josh Metellus and only scored 50 less points.
Oh, no. in 10 fewer games.
10 fewer games.
All right, let's wrap this thing up with, as I mentioned, sleepers and busts, kind of an ode to our show next week. Any under-the-radar players that you have to leave your draft with, or high-profile players that you're absolutely avoiding. You gave me some names at each position, so let's just take it position by position, go ahead and go in, talk about these guys as much or as little as you want, Joe.
Yeah, so there's only one guy that you definitely want here, because again, with sleepers at the receiver position, at the running back position, you're going to have 3 to 4 backs on your team, maybe 5. You're going to have 5 to 6, maybe 7 receivers on your team. So yeah, you need to look at guys in the wide receiver 40s, 50s, and 60s that may jump into the 20s, into the teens. Most of the time in IDP, your top 25 are going to finish within that top 25 range. Obviously, injuries and things like that. But it's not deep enough for you to go like, oh, the defensive lineman 35 ranked. Oh, I like that guy. I should snatch him. No, because the DL 12 is probably still going to be there. Like, again, like a Dexter Lawrence is going to be there. So, but in deeper leagues, or you want to have a little fun, or you might need a guy on a bye week.
I was just going to say, these kind of guys are the guys that you look out for in streaming. So
Abdul Carter, that goes without saying.
Absolutely.
He should be a very good talent. I don't want to use generational because I think that's an overused term, but he's a very high profile talent, one of the best defensive ends we've seen probably since Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons come out of the draft. Zach Allen, you don't know him, you never heard of him. He's the white defensive end for the Cardinals and now the Broncos. This man is just a consistent force of nature. I love Zach Allen. He will have about 6 to 7 games a year where you're like, damn, that guy really? Zach Allen is a guy to look at in terms of a matchup-based game. He plays in Denver. You need a guy. If he's playing the Raiders that week, that's a great matchup.
Great play.
So just keep your eye on Zach Allen. Another guy to keep your eye on is Grover Stewart. May have heard of him. He's a little more disruptive force. Grover Stewart's massive. He plays for the Colts. 3 horrendous offensive lines that he sees 6 times a year. Love Grover Stewart. I think he's a guy you should look out for, especially on a matchup basis. But in deeper leagues, like if you even have to play 2 defensive linemen, Grover Stewart's a guy to look at for a backup.
Yeah, he's going to be borderline top 20, top 24 on a weekly basis.
Injury history a little bit. Some character questions sometimes, but Grover Stewart's a fantastic player.
And I know don't draft
Trey Hendrickson. It hurts my heart. Don't draft Trey Hendrickson. Ryan, what did I say 2 years ago? Where did I rank Trey Hendrickson?
Number 5.
And where did he end up?
Number 5.
Where did I rank Trey Hendrickson last year?
Number 4.
Where did he end up?
Number 4 or number 1? Yeah.
Where did I rank him this year?
At least not in your top 10.
I don't have Trey Hendrickson probably inside my top.
This is a contract thing, or is it a no longer a partner in crime thing with his buddy retiring?
Well, the Sam Hubbard thing definitely plays a part. I think Sam Hubbard was a fantastic opposite guy from him, and they got Shamar Stewart. Is that the guy I'm thinking of in the draft?
Him in the first round of the draft. Yep.
They got Shamar Stewart, so which is good. They have a guy opposite, but they also
a lot of Bengals fans
Murphy.
During our live stream were not happy with that. I was just going to say they were comparing the Miles Murphy thing. So.
Yeah. So again, they don't really have a force opposite him, but this whole contract situation I don't love. Hendrickson is getting up there in age. I believe he's 33, if not 34, which for a defensive end, who cares? Calais Campbell's 75 and still playing the sport at a high level, I might add.
Like, one of the better D tackles still in the game.
Still in the NFL. I just, the contract situation worries me. A guy of that age not working out.
And it's starting to get ugly now. I don't want to overstate it getting ugly because we saw this same thing play out with Myles Garrett. But I may be spreading the wrong rumors here, but I saw a headline that there were text messages between he and the head coach, and there's some animosity going on right now, it appears. So
100%. So that's what worries me about Trey Hendrickson. If this was a normal year, Trey probably would sit at 11 or 12 for me. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 10.
Just because of the aging and the
again, that's why I'm shocked. I know the consensus, it's only 3 people and it's very early on, but I'm shocked Trey Hendrickson's at 10. And I know that's probably out of respect for what he's done the last 2 seasons, but that's still crazy to me.
And that's something we caution people against, though, Joe, is don't take a guy just because of his name. I brought that up with someone earlier in the show, but it's like you don't just have to do this because you recognize the name. They're not all Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner has earned the fucking respect that he's getting. So.
Bobby Wagner will. I honestly, when I put Wagner at 9, I was like, damn, that might be generous for him. And then I saw the consensus at 5. I'm like, that
So
high.
I remember
Wagner.
when Wagner ended up with the Rams, I was ready to write him off, and you stopped me. You said no, he still has something.
He's Bobby
he
Wagner.
Killed it that year with the Rams. So.
He is Bobby Wagner. We don't write him off, all right? Bobby Wagner will live inside my top 10. He might be 10, but he'll live inside the top 10 until that man disintegrates on the football field.
I think we just need to see Bobby Wagner and Levante David run full force at each other, and the whole universe explodes. And that's how this.
All I know is London Fletcher played until he was ancient at 36 in a Redskins uniform, and that's where Bobby is right now. So
there you go.
that's all I know. Linebackers, the guy next to Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. Yeah. When Bobby Wagner says you're really good at football, maybe we should listen. Frankie Louvu had a career year last year. If Wagner even goes down or misses something, even not, Frankie Louvu is fantastic. He had a really good season last year. I'll skip Henley because I want to just touch on Van Ginkel. Don't draft Andrew Van Ginkel, please, God. His stats were so inflated because of sacks, and good for him. And if you are in a sack-heavy league, or if there's an edge rusher position and you can put Van Ginkel there.
Pick 6 last year,
he had 2 pick sixes last year. So that's another stat inflation, and that's why I have Alontae Taylor on my DB bust. Andrew Van Ginkel had a couple pick sixes. That inflates your value. He is not a top 10 linebacker, and that's where he currently was last season. So caution on Van Ginkel.
I just want to quickly throw out, there were 16 linebacker touchdowns last year, and Van Ginkel had 2 of them. That is how strange that stat is. Do not bank on that.
Yes. Deion Henley.
This is a sleeper, not a bust, folks.
This is a sleeper, not a bust. Deion Henley scored more points than Bobby Wagner last year. Deion Henley had the same amount of fantasy points per game as Bobby Wagner last year. Deion Henley was 17th in total points last year. He was 27th in points per game. Maybe asking yourself, Joe, you just talk shit about guys that were outside of the top 24. Why do you have this guy at 6 or 5? Where'd I put him? I think I put him at 5. 6, excuse me. I put Spillane at 5. I flipped them earlier. The Chargers are in love with Deion Henley. They love this guy. This is his 3rd year in the league, so this should be the year that Deion Henley takes the stride, kicks the league in the teeth, and says,
we should start seeing 90 to 100% of snaps at this point. So,
and we should start seeing 90 to 100 solo tackles at this point. Deion Henley is really good. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more. He had 82 solo tackles last year. The number one guy, Zaire Franklin, had 93. Yeah. Again, some of the big differences.
And the number one guy is the number one guy, and Henley is not even ranked in the consensus top 10.
Yes. So. And here's the thing. With Henley, he only had 1 sack. He had 8 pass deflections, so he actually does drop into coverage. That's the most pass deflections of anybody inside the top 20. But he only had 1 pick. Didn't have a forced fumble, didn't have a fumble recovery. So that obviously is going to hurt you. Also, obviously, at that point, did not have a defensive touchdown, which most of these guys ahead of him had. Henley just needs 1. He needs to force a couple more turnovers.
And say 8 pass deflections shows the process is there. He just needs to take one of those. So
he literally needs a pick 6, and he's the linebacker 6. And he's going to get over 90 solos this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Deion Henley. The Chargers love him, and he has grown from his rookie season into what he is now in year 3. So keep your eye on Deion Henley. I think he's going to be very good. DBs. Do you know Jeremy Chinn's a Raider?
When I almost confused Cameron Curl earlier, Chinn kind of replaced Cameron Curl in your love of safeties.
Let me tell you how tempted I was to put Jeremy Chinn in my top 10, knowing that he's a safety.
Monster year last year, then moves teams this year, which is, I think, what's worrying folks. So.
Safety in a Pete Carroll defense.
I feel like those have been pretty good, Joe.
Thank you. I just, historically, I mean, I'm not going to say Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor are Hall of Famers, but they were pretty fucking good.
They were the best in the league when they were the best in the league. So
you don't get when's the last time a secondary's been nicknamed something?
Yeah, exactly.
That secondary was pretty damn good. The Legion of Boom, led by Chance, and Jeremy Chinn does not hit like Cam Chancellor. Holy shit, that man hit like a.
Well, let's be clear, you're not allowed to hit like Cam Chancellor anymore.
We're not allowed to hit like Cam Chancellor anymore. But Jeremy Chinn is probably going to play a somewhat Cam Chancellor role which we love to see.
Just certainly for fantasy.
Go look at Cam Chancellor's stats from 2012 to 2014 and just ooze happiness. Because that's what Jeremy Chin can do. And Chin, only like 26, 27. He's still young.
Still very young guy.
Carolina misused him. Had a bounce back year with the Commanders last year. Gets a contract with the Raiders. Pete Carroll's system to the moon. Byron Murphy, the best player on the Vikings. He actually looked good last year. He is a corner, so it is a week-to-week basis type thing.
Scored more fantasy points than Josh Metellus. Just throwing
You're damn right he did. You're damn right he did, because Josh Metellus is a fucking bum. Byron Murphy should be good. Byron Murphy is probably my second in terms of cornerbacks behind Paulson Adebo. Alante Taylor,
which we talked about.
Buyer beware. Please do not go get Alante Taylor. I have to pull up the defensive back stats because he did rank very high in terms of, also real quick, I'm shocked Zach Bond was not in the consensus top 10 at linebacker because he was linebacker 2 last year. And my worry with Zach Bond.
He didn't make your top 10.
No, I know. You want to know why? Jihad Campbell.
I see what you're saying. So, okay, yeah. You're shocked that he seems like the kind of guy the consensus would overinflate.
Yeah, he seems like the kind of the consensus would ooze over 100%. Alante Taylor. He had 2 touchdowns last year.
Which, again, you cannot count on that.
Let's take away those 2 touchdowns. He was the DB11 last year. He only had 10.5 points per game. Not very good. Let's take away the 2 touchdowns last year. So that's 12 points, correct?
12 fantasy points, which is going to knock him immediately down to 9 points per game. And then the DB, 24?
That'll knock him outside of the top 20.
Yep.
He had 4 sacks as a corner.
As a corner, folks.
Cannot rely on that.
Nope.
The only guy ahead of him that had more was Derwin James. And what position does he play, Ryan?
Safety.
And
in the box safety.
In the box safety. He also had 16 pass deflections, which, as a corner,
I was going to say that you could look at it as a good thing, but it also means he's missing a lot of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So. And a couple forced fumbles, no interceptions. And those forced fumbles turned into touchdowns.
Yeah.
So that's why I want you to be aware of Alante Taylor. He had a great year last year, but he was heavily inflated by the first 2 games that the Saints blew out teams, and everyone was like, dang, are the Saints good? And then they sainted, and then everything was fine. So if you do not go get Alante Taylor.
Hopefully you sold your Saints after week 2 last year, and we were telling you to.
Last year, my DB bust. You remember who it was, Ryan?
I don't.
CJ Gardner-Johnson. How did you do last year?
Terrible. Which is why he's already on to another team yet again. So.
I'm not saying I'm the best at this stuff, but I'm pretty damn good at IDP.
You really are. Like I said, I give you all the credit in the world. I always when I've done shows with our good friends over at Fantasy and Frames, I always used to say, I'm not great at IDP. I'm great at figuring out scoring systems. And that's kind of always been my advantage in fantasy football is I can figure out scoring systems. And I was able to implement that into IDP along with your help. Mm-hmm. You understand the defensive side of the ball better than anyone I talk to on a weekly basis. So I always enjoy your takes on these. You know your shit. Thanks, no lies detected.
Thanks, man. And what Xavier McKinney out of the top 10 too, but he was a turnover machine. That's why.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was going to get at with that. With Joe, Joe will call himself an expert, but I said, Joe really does know defense. We don't cover a lot of IDP or defense on the show, but Joe and I are here every week. So if you guys have questions during the season, during this preseason, drop them into the chat. We never miss a question in the chat, and we're going to be there to help you. Joe, any parting words for our friends on IDP before I get us out of here?
You should all play it. It's way more fun. You could start Alante Taylor and he'd still have more points than your team defense. So you could start Josh Metellus. He'd still have more points. You don't want to, but he would have more points than your team defense. It makes it so much more fun. It makes you feel more invested in the game as a whole. How much fun is it that on Monday Night Football, it doesn't come down to a running back, it doesn't come down to a wide receiver. It comes down to, can Derwin James get you 5 tackles in a forced fumble, and you're keyed in on you're keyed in on number 3 at the safety position, and you're pissed when Dayon Henley steals a tackle. You're like, what is happening to me right now? Electric moments, let me tell you.
There you
That's
go.
what you want.
If you guys want to like football better, get into IDP. Thank you so much, Joe. You carried the show as you normally do anyway, but this time it was by design. So we very much appreciate you. Next week, guys, we are officially kicking off a redraft season here at Club Fantasy. It is going to be our sleeper QB episode. And you may be asking yourself, did you guys do that last year? No, we didn't. We are changing things up a little bit. So next week is going to be our sleeper QB episode. We are still going to do our Look Inside series. It is still going to be an article, but we are now going to do shorter shows breaking down some of our favorite fantasy players from every single team. So next week on No Punt Intended, it's going to be sleeper QBs. On Friday, this upcoming Friday, Mock It Like It's Hot is going to do our last Dynasty mock draft of the year. We have Marvin Eloquin from the Fantasy Footballers coming on to the show. It's going to be a really, really fun draft. And then those shows are going to transfer over to redraft because it's that time of year. It's ready. Start time to get ready for those kinds of drafts. We did best ball last week, a little bit IDP this week. It's full redraft from here on out. But as I mentioned, we are still going to do our Look Inside series. So look out for those articles. Look out for those short videos. We're going to cover every single team in the NFL, some of our favorite players. And that's it. You guys could be looking out for that. Redraft season is upon us. It's going to be a great, great summer here at Club Fantasy. We will see you guys next week for QB Sleepers. Always remember, defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football. QB Sleepers next week. Have a good one.